Tuning in to the online broadcast network, AFTERBUZZ TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your #1 source for after-show entertainment. AFTERBUZZ TV, the destination for TV superfans. Producing aftershows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows. Interviewing celebrities and showrunners. And bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Thank you for tuning in to the Madam Secretary After Show for Season 1, Episode 8, Need to Know. I'm Sterling Cates, and joining me again tonight is April Whisenhant.
Hey guys, what's up?
So this was a pretty good episode.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. Let's start off talking about Henry and the NSA. So we saw a little bit of a preview into this last week when she kind of knows about it, know that the president has asked him to kind of go undercover again.
Right.
Because since he's a professor, he kind of has reason to be at these events to get the target, who we find out this episode is Klaus.
Mm-hmm.
And he is... So they think that he could potentially be a threat, and so they want to bug his house, and that's essentially how Henry gets involved.
Right. And his plan with the little chess set is kind of ingenious, and it's crazy that he could remember this chess set that they purchased together in Jerusalem so long ago.
Right.
And that they could replicate something so exact.
Yeah. So it makes sense that they would choose Henry for this mission because he is... It makes sense for him because he has a history with this Klaus guy, and it would make sense for him to run into him at these events and to go into his house and be invited there and that sort of stuff. So it all kind of makes sense.
Right.
But Elizabeth at the beginning is asking Russell, the chief of staff, why is this happening? Blah blah blah, and because it is dangerous, there is a risk with him becoming involved in all of this undercover work because he is a public figure. So if that's to come out, that can not only be a huge risk for their family, but for the United States.
And for her, and her job, because essentially if it comes out that her husband was a spy, no diplomat from another country is going to trust her. Because they're going to think, oh, are you spying on me? You know, whether they're an ally or not. And basically we learned that the president kind of decided that it was worth taking the risk using Henry.
Yeah. Well, and like we said, it's because he's really the only person that can get this job done.
Right.
So he goes to this, is it an archaeological event or something like that? So it doesn't really make sense for him to be there, but he says he's talking to Klaus and at this event, and he says he's doing research for a new book. But Klaus seems really suspicious at this point.
I agree, which I guess, if you're planning to attack part of the Americas or wherever he's attacking, you're going to be suspicious of pretty much everyone, but especially someone who, just happens to appear at a random event in your life. And whenever you're in that position and you're in, or you're working with the government and doing some illegal activity, maybe bringing over, they talked about the sarin gas that they think he stole and brought with him to the United States that they think he's planning on using.
Right.
You're going to be suspicious of everyone. And I kind of didn't think Henry was doing the greatest job at playing it off. There were times where I'm like, oh, dude, you gotta stop sweating.
Yeah.
But he did it. But so I think Klaus is smarter than they're kind of giving him credit for.
Right. And I think that just speaks to Henry's character because he is such a good guy that he's a terrible liar.
Right.
So when we're watching it, it's very obvious that he's kind of playing a role here.
Right. But I'm like, you're in the NSA. You got to be a better liar than that, dude.
Yeah, well, maybe that's why he's a professor now.
Yeah, I guess so. We see him be a better liar, though, by the end of the episode.
Right. Exactly. So speaking about the home life, so Elizabeth isn't very excited. She thinks this is a huge risk. She doesn't want him to be doing these undercover jobs, but she can't really tell him not to because he lets her do whatever she wants career-wise to completely supports him. But it is hard because she has such a a confidential job that she can't share a lot of information about, and now he does too. So they don't have a lot of stuff to talk about. You know, pillow talk is kind of boring now because they're like, well, what'd you do today? And they can't say anything on either side. So
I wonder how that's going to play out, like with any sort of tension and that sort of thing, which hopefully it won't, because they both seem to be very understanding of the other's position. But I think, you know, now with the last scene of the show where they're laying in bed and she asks him if the mission is over and he says yes, he's not interested in doing that anymore. It wasn't for him. But, you know, we saw a few scenes before that, him speaking with the lady who was kind of in charge, or his handler, and he tells her that he wants to help out. You know, he has kids who live within just a few miles of where Klaus could potentially release this sarin gas, and does she know what it can do? So he wants to help out as much as he can, and he wants her to speak to the president about it. My thing is, I don't really know what sarin gas is. Obviously, it is something very dangerous, dangerous and deadly. But he, you know, just like I said, he did a good job by the end of the episode lying. So
yeah,
I didn't expect that from him. I thought he wouldn't. He would just kind of continue with the, I can't tell you anything. I didn't think he would go the route of like, it's done, I'm finished with that.
Yeah. Well, Russell had told her that it was a short-term thing. It was just going to be for this one job. All he needed him for was this one thing, which he accomplished. He successfully got the chess piece with the bug into the house. He played it off pretty well. Like, I thought when he got caught, when he went to the bathroom, but he got caught in the room with the chessboard and switching out the chess pieces.
I'm like, it's over.
Yeah, I was like, oh gosh, he can't get out of this one because he can't lie, you know, to save his life. Literally. And so, but he says, he's like, okay, I just couldn't help myself because they had a history with chess, so it made sense. And he was like, but let's play for the set. So by saying let's play for it, it kind of is like, okay, well, I could take this, so maybe it's not as suspicious.
I agree.
But he ends up asking for a draw because he says he needs to get home, blah, 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 and it ends up staying. But Klaus seems so suspicious there. I didn't think that he was going to let him get away with it.
Yeah. But I also am like, I mean, clearly he ended the game because he didn't know if Klaus was about to pick up the piece or the real piece, because he thought that the fake piece was a little too heavy and then he would notice. So, I mean, it definitely is a weird thing. I would think that was weird in just normal everyday life. If I'm in, you know, the most like intense part of a game with someone and they're just like, oh, gotta go. Yeah. I mean, that's not the best way, but I guess, you know, you have to think on your feet when you're in the NSA, apparently.
Right, exactly. I wouldn't know, but it seems that way,
Would
right?
you know?
I don't know. I can't talk about it. But so he had a successful mission.
Right.
I guess, I mean, that we know of.
Yeah.
I guess we don't really know if Klaus was kind of just playing along or if he was really oblivious to everything that was going on. But it seems that, you know, the bug is active. He got out of there safely without a hitch, it seems.
The thing that I'm wondering about is that it was almost too easy for Henry to get invited to Klaus's house, because that was the whole point. That was the whole point of the chess piece. They knew about this, so they replicated the chess piece so that he could plan it.
Right.
So he needed to get into his house. He had sent an email to Klaus, you know, asking him to go to lunch, like wanting to connect a little more, so maybe then he could get an invite. But then Klaus shows up at his school and it's just like, hey, I'm having a thing in my house. Want to come?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, was he on to him?
Yeah, maybe he was. Yeah, actually, I didn't think about that before. But when the first time they met at that event, he was supposed to secure an invite to the house that day.
Right.
And then he didn't, because he felt like it was forced. You can't just ask somebody if you can come over to their house, especially.
Hey, can I go
you mind if I come over?
Yeah.
But I guess by extending the lunch invite, it kind of made it seem more neutral. Like, let's meet for lunch, and then maybe I can come over. Like, there's no like non-awkward way to do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't think it felt unnatural. Like, especially since there were other people there. It was an actual party.
Right.
So I didn't think it was weird. But now that you mention it, maybe that is what's going on there. But so I think that once he kind of got back in the rhythm of being undercover and feeling like he's doing something, like being successful with the mission and everything, that's probably why he was like, well, if you need me, I'm here. Like, I'm already invested. I'm already lying to everyone. Like, I might as well.
Yeah. And I
follow through.
I kind of get it, you know. Obviously, there's a huge risk to his life and to his family and everything. But, you know, even just like watching the show, I'm like, of course, if you kind of catch the bug, like the president has you on a top secret
on the
mission
radar
that no one else knows about. I mean, it's, of course, who wouldn't want to be involved in something like that? I mean, I guess
I don't think I would. I don't think I would.
That's crazy in me. I don't know, but I'm like, ooh, top secret mission sounds like my kind
Sounds
of game.
like fun. But yeah, but at the end, so we clearly see that he's interested in seeing this through to the end.
Right.
When he's talking with his supervisor. Is that what she is?
It's
a handler. That's right. But at the end, Elizabeth is asking him about how it is, and if, you know, she's kind of like, oh, I was worried you were enjoying it there. But he says to her, and we know outright it's a lie, that it's not for him. Like, he's over with it. He's through, blah, blah, blah. But we know that potentially isn't the case.
Right. And that's why I say he became a good liar.
Right. But we don't know if he'll actually continue to be involved or not. Right. But I'm assuming he will be. Mm-hmm. Because there's got to be...
This game ain't over yet.
Okay, we'll talk about... Sure. We'll finish this up in predictions, because I want to talk about whether or not we think he'll get involved and what we think is going to happen there. But before we get into the whole Moldova incident, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please go on iTunes and rate and review our podcast. And yeah, tweet us. Let us know what you think. We're loving the show. We're loving how it's building up for me. It's getting better. We're learning more about the characters. Still want to learn more about Blake, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so let's get back into it. So let's talk about, obviously, Madam Secretary and what she's dealing with this episode.
Some craziness.
Yeah, she's got some cray-cray stuff happening. So each episode, we're seeing a different side of her responsibilities and her duties that she has as Secretary of State. And this one, the Prime Minister of Moldova, Dyakov, is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
He is coming to America, to ask for American military help to deal with a separatist group organization has launched an offensive against their government and him, and they're led by Kolba.
Right.
And so he's coming to Madam Secretary for American military help.
Right, because Kolba and his group have, like, the newest, best stuff that the Prime Minister says they just don't have.
Right.
And so they need our help.
And Kolba has been killing innocent Moldovians or Moldovans, innocent people to restore the Russian Empire and all this stuff. So they're coming for help. But she can't, just offer... She can't just throw in the troops. Right. It's not that easy. So she does bring in this... she does bring in Jim, who she used to work with in the CIA.
Right.
He has a huge history. He's ethnically Moldovan.
Right.
Yeah, and he speaks the language. He's part of the culture, and he knows what he's doing, and he specializes in cases like these. So she sends them, Jim and the Prime Minister, back to Moldova to kind of, figure something out here. So she's not sending him empty-handed.
Right.
But the plane goes missing. So
and we have no idea
it just completely disappears. They don't know what happened. They don't know if it got shot down. They don't know if it just went off the grid. They have no idea. And meanwhile, Kolba is sending inappropriate tweets about her legs. I don't know. He just seems like he's
obviously
gross.
like he's a major sexist, they say, and is sending stuff about her just because he knows that she's against him, which of course she would be. Of course she's going to support the Prime Minister. Right. So I'm just like, what a jerk face though. Like, come on.
What a jerk face.
I know. Good
you tell him, April.
Good choice of words right there. But he, I'm like, how do you have time for this? Not that of course I'm not supporting what he's doing because he's going to essentially like ruin a country if he succeeds. But it's like, okay, if you're going to be the leader of these separatists, I don't think even...
Well, I mean, he's sending out these videos. He's going on this, rant online, surrounded by prostitutes, talking about Madam Secretary's legs and how she shouldn't hide them. What was the hashtag? What was the hashtag he said? It was
gosh, I don't even know.
It was like hashtag wear a mini skirt or something.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, so he's obviously...
that's bad that I think that's good.
I mean, it was...
Clever.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting how they're incorporating the social media and all of this stuff and the whole thing, because I feel like we don't.
You got to kind of think about it, you know, and obviously this is social media is a new thing. They didn't have like ways to communicate or ways to see what like a leader was actually really like.
Right.
And so they can learn a lot. Obviously you can learn a lot about a person by their Twitter if they run their own Twitter.
Exactly.
And this dude is clearly up to some funky junk. I don't know where
you were just
tonight,
yeah, the vocab over there.
Right.
But anyway, so these inappropriate tweets are happening, but they have to decide whether or not to engage with this kind of behavior. Matt and Madam Secretary both think that they shouldn't engage, because then they kind of like they stoop down to that level. If you recognize it, then it kind of gives it credit.
Matt was exactly right whenever he said if we do this, or I guess it wasn't Matt that said it, was Madam Secretary that said it. If we engage and if we respond, it turns the headline from, you know, Kolba, leader of the separatists, doing this to Moldova into, oh, Secretary of State responds to inappropriate tweets.
Right.
And it's just, that's not what it's about.
It brings her into it, and they aren't focusing on what's important here, which is the missing plane. Right. Because there's more issues here than you know, the leg tweets.
Which in real life is what happens so often today, I feel like, too, is that, you know, social media and different things can bring too much of a personal kind of emotional aspect into politics, where it's like, no, let's be real, these are the things that are important. This is what we should be focusing on, not about like what a person said on their Twitter account 3 years ago.
Right. And I mean, it's sad, and I'm guilty of it too, that we, as a culture, we're more entertained by the kind of scandalous side. Like, I can't believe he tweeted about her wearing a mini skirt, like blah, 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 like as opposed to like the more, you know,
actual serious happenings.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I think that's what makes her so good at her job, is that she is able to just overlook all of that and be like, no, that's stupid.
Yeah. But so they're trying to keep this whole plane situation under the wraps, because people can't know that like Jim is there, because he's technically undercover, and they don't have many details. So they want to, when Daisy's making the statement, they want to seem concerned but not too concerned. And, you know, there's always that line there. How much information should we give? What's safe to give? Blah, blah, blah. But they notify Jim's wife, obviously, and she is in hysterics. It's interesting. I'm glad we've already talked about Henry and Elizabeth not being able to talk about their jobs and how it's also secretive and everything. And I thought that was a great parallel to what Jim's wife was saying, because she's like, I know the drill. I get all he's always not lying. Well, he's lying, you know, technically, about where he is. Well, he's on this undercover mission to Moldova, but she thinks he's at a training thing in Dallas. So it's lying, but he has no other choice. It's not malicious by any means, but she gets it. And that's kind of how Henry and Elizabeth are now, because they both have very secretive jobs. Neither one of them know what the other one's doing during the day. And it's scary, because they're very high risk, dangerous jobs, and you can be a target at any moment. So, and now Jim's wife is kind of experiencing the scariest part of it, because they don't know where he is. They don't know where the plane is.
I can't even imagine.
She doesn't know if he's dead or not.
And she seems to be fed up with it.
Yeah. It's like she's been dealing with this for a while.
And I can imagine always having to wonder, like, is my husband dead or alive? I mean, that's
exactly.
insane.
I mean, it's crazy. So she decides to stay there until they learn more information. So she's sleeping on the couch. They're bringing food to her. I mean, I would do the same thing.
Heck yeah.
So they get more information that the co-pilot of the plane had a meeting with Kolba, and he apparently is Turkish, and I guess they didn't do enough research on him before they let him fly the plane. So he murdered the pilot and took over the plane. And they find the plane at Kolba's airfield. So, so they think they're holding the Prime Minister and Jim captive in the control tower, but there's no confirmation as to whether or not they're alive or what's going on.
And it's like, how do you make that decision? You know, they start discussing, she wants to send troops in, you know, a lot of other people in their meeting don't, but it's like, how do you make that decision when you don't know if they're alive or dead, which I guess is a decision that they have to face every day.
And at the end of the day, they need to assume they're alive and try to go get them.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, so she remembers this mission that she had done when she was in the CIA, like in the 70s or whatever, and where they impersonate the leader or whatever. So Kolba has this Phantom car that's like his signature car. He's like always, that's just like how he is. Yeah. So basically, I don't know, it seems so easy to me that they just get a Phantom that looks just like his and then they drive in.
It's easy, but so genius, because the part where I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm laughing right now. The part where the general brings up, there's a problem. We don't know. His schedule is always erratic. We never know where he's going to be. How are you going to control that? And she's like, and she
get
comes
him on
up
video,
with,
chat.
get him on video. I'll negotiate with him while we do this. And so they're just going to basically pretend to be him, drive the rolls on up with his security in tow, and then start taking down some separatists.
Right? Yeah. That was crazy. They just drove in there and just started shooting them. And it was so easy for them to... I'm surprised they didn't check inside the car before they got inside the gates. Yeah. But I guess since he just drives in there, usually the car... He had the whole entourage, everything. So I guess they obviously planned it.
Right. Simple, but genius.
But effective.
Yeah.
I like it. But so she distracts him on video chat. She kind of plays dumb here. She's like, "Oh, we can't find the plane. Help! Help us!" But she's obviously distracting him. We know that he doesn't. He's still asking about her legs. Give it a rest.
I kind of thought he was gonna, she was gonna play into it, oh, cool.
No, I didn't want her to.
No, I didn't want her to, but I kind of thought she was for a second, because she was, getting all gussied up before and fixing her hair and that sort of thing. So I thought she was going to, but I'm proud that she didn't. But it was kind of crazy once they finally rolled in, started shooting the guys. And
one thing I will say about that is I'm surprised that because her first instinct before they decided on what mission they were going to do, her first instinct was to take military action. And that hasn't been a pattern of hers in all of the other things that she's done. She's always one to, okay, let's talk this out. Let's come up with a compromise. Let's figure this out. So, to incorporate that in her initial plan, to me, was surprising. But I think that was the only way things are going to get done with this particular. Sometimes you don't have a choice. So I'm glad that they kind of mix that up there, because you can't always, it's not realistic to always deal with someone who's not going to compromise.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And that is America's #1 stance, so we don't negotiate with terrorists.
Right.
And they are essentially terrorists.
Exactly.
To their own country, but, it's not something we deal with.
Right. So they get inside of the control tower, and they find Dykov dead. And then they find Jim, who I thought was dead because they had him hanging there. So they've obviously been tortured.
Right.
And but he apparently is alive. Did they say he was alive? Because I didn't think
they didn't right that second.
Yeah, they didn't, because they didn't say anything until the next scene.
They walked up to him and said, "What's your name?" So that's why I assumed he was alive.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
He was just hanging there.
Yeah. Okay, anyways, I didn't figure it out until the next scene when they were telling her that he was flying home. He was on a plane, and the president wanted to meet him.
But she says, not before his family.
Right.
Which, because she's a family lady after all.
She truly is. So, yeah, unfortunately, the prime minister died, but Jim was alive. So,
and they already reinstated a new one, and apparently the new prime minister was taking credit for the entire project.
Yeah, which is good, because I don't think she. Another thing I like about her is that she's not always seeking credit. She doesn't have these ambitions of taking over the universe like most people in politics do.
Very true.
So, but she just wants there to be peace. She wants things to happen, blah, blah, blah. But also, by her doing that, it's that's how a lot of those things do. That she doesn't want America to be like, America did this, America did this. Now it's peace within their own nation, and they can take care of that. And the new prime minister can have an easy way in. You know what I mean? Very good point. But yeah, so I mean, and then Russell, chief of staff, who at the beginning of the season they were kind of enemies there. They didn't really get along. They were stepping on each other's toes. Didn't really have a balance. But it seems like they're getting along really well now. They kind of have a little camaraderie thing. They're making jokes. Yeah, making jokes. This whole thing. So they're not really enemies anymore. Right. They seem to be working together a lot better than they were at the beginning of the season.
Definitely.
Which I like.
I do too.
I like them working together.
They seem to have a good little cordial thing going on, so hopefully it'll continue with them.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing before, it wasn't really on her part at all. It was him being jealous of how the president always chose her plan over his.
Right. But now we see the president kind of going, not necessarily going against her, but, you know, even with, you know, last week with the trip to Turkey.
Yeah.
And then this week we see, you know, he's basically
With
like
Henry.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's
more important than.
Right. Maybe that's why Russell's kind of backing off a little bit, because he sees that it's not all
about her.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that solved. Russell's proud of her for how she handled it. Yada yada. For a brief second, let's talk about Daisy and Matt. I'm kind of over this.
Me too.
Their side storyline. Like, I'm just not interested compared to like attacks in Moldova and all this stuff. I don't want to have a little shot back to Daisy and Matt. I just don't really care.
And it all comes back to the chemistry, I think, because if it was, you know, a couple that we felt really were meant to be together or just really had some good chemistry, we'd probably like cherish those little, you know, more playful moments in a more serious show.
Yeah.
But at this point, I'm just like, ugh, like get back to the real stuff.
So it seems, I just don't, what I don't get, I mean, obviously I think what they're trying to do is that, because Daisy's going around the office showing off her engagement ring, blah, 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 she's seemingly happy, whatever. I think what they're trying to do is make it seem, this episode she's a little too happy about her real relationship with Wen.
Yeah.
She's so happy to where it doesn't seem like there's anything between her and Matt anymore. But they're holding on to it so strong that it's just kind of like, all right, either let it go or make her seem like she cares more about him. Because it doesn't seem like she cares at all.
No. And they're bringing the awkwardness into the workplace.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously they have a conversation about it at the end because it's going to affect other people.
Yeah.
And, you know, Matt's definitely still super awkward about it. Daisy is just no dust off her back, no shoulders, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm just kind of like, meh, meh.
Yeah. Well, Nadine says, okay, I don't care what you do in your private lives, but whatever it is, just don't bring it into the office and don't let it interfere with our work, because then it does become my business.
Exactly.
And it's interesting that Nadine says that because she had an affair with the previous secretary, but I guess that never really came out, so she definitely knows how to separate those lives. I don't know.
Speaking
I
of
guess
affairs,
we'll see if that. I guess we'll see if that develops. I'm not, you know.
Matt and
We'll
Daisy,
see. Maybe it'll get better.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it in predictions. Okay, let's talk about the at-home life, because the show really is, you know, about Henry and Elizabeth balancing these crazy lives, crazy high-profile / private lives that are dangerous, risky, whatever, with their home life and their kids. And this episode is more focused on Jason. This is the son. He hasn't really gotten an episode all about him. It's always been about the sister, so I guess it was his turn.
Yeah.
But he likes a new girl. This girl in Madison, and it's funny how watching them deal with their son's crush versus how they're dealing with like international affairs.
I know. But that's kind of my favorite part of the show. Obviously, I like the you know, super intense, you know, government parts for sure, but I also like how they don't ever forget to show, like, hey, this is what's happening in our normal life. And we do have this.
We have a real life too.
Right. We have this very intense, very important job.
Yeah.
But we also have kids who have crushes on girls and they want to take her to the movies.
Like real stuff happening. And when you have these life talks with them and about how and Henry talks to Jason about how he should treat women and be respectful, blah, blah, blah.
And not rate them on a scale of 1 to, he's like, her friend is an 8.5, so maybe I want to take her friend to the movies instead.
Yeah, don't be shallow, Jason. Such a young age. We see it starting already.
I thought it was kind of cute, though. I mean, well, cute because he's so young, but if he's
shaping the minds
if he's
of
like
our
a 15-year-old, then it's awful. But he doesn't even know what he's saying, I feel like.
Yeah, so we have stuff like that, like really real family stuff that happens, and then it goes. They're burning dinner. They're always having takeout, and so they're obviously.
It's like every kid's dream.
Yeah, like, every night is dinner.
Oh, let's get takeout. Whenever I was young, Mom's like, "Oh, I'm making dinner." I'm like, "What? We're not having McDonald's." It's every kid's dream.
Right. Well, I guess they don't have time to cook dinner every night when they're dealing with, you know, terrorists.
International
and stuff.
terrorists.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay, so the last part that we need to talk about this episode is this whole Secretary Marsh George situation. So this has been a lingering topic for the past 8 episodes, but they haven't really talked about it much since George died. So just a little refresher. Secretary Marsh was her predecessor. God, I can't speak English. Oh, geez. Anyways, and he died in a plane crash.
Right.
And when, so throughout this episode, she kind of was digging for a little more information about the plane crash, about, how it all went down, and if people went through a lie detector test and all this stuff, which didn't happen.
Because it was very easily ruled an accident, she thought. And because of a loose screw.
Yeah.
And let's be real. I mean, yes, that absolutely happens, of course. We've seen it happen before in actual real life.
Yeah.
But
then it makes you think, is it really just a loose screw?
Right. But it would be, it would be a little easy, just to be like, oh, it was an accident. Of course we looked into this, because why would we not?
Yeah.
But...
And going off the easy part, it'd be a little convenient to start the show that way, because then it's like, oh, now she's Secretary of State. You know what I mean? Like, there needs to be something else there for why now she was brought in,
And I think she's doing exactly what really any person would do. Because, yes, there are absolutely accidents and coincidences in life.
But this is TV.
I would say, but even in real life, I would say like 8 out of 10 times, it's not a coincidence.
Right. And it needs to be looked into.
Yeah.
And then it kind of makes you wonder if the guy who was in her office doing the investigation on it, if he's in on it, or because when she asked, he was like, why do you ask? Why are you asking me that? Like,
I thought he was.
He seemed very cautious or very suspicious about.
And whenever she asked, did we polygraph the grounds crew, he's like, no, that's not protocol. It seems like when a national leader of the United States is accidentally killed, you would look into every single option. I would assume that anyway. Yeah. So it definitely adds a little fishiness to that storyline.
Yeah. So I mean, this whole season we've already known, because of George, who she has a past with working with in the CIA. George, for some reason that we don't know yet, thinks that, or knew rather, that it was an inside job for Secretary Marsh to be killed, for that plane crash to not be an accident.
Right.
So that he was murdered. And George had this information, blah, 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 went to Elizabeth when she was first inducted or whatever, and he told her that he was murdered and that he has all this information, blah, blah, blah. And he tells her to be careful because it was an inside job.
But he never says what information he had.
Right. Well, because she's kind of like, I don't know. She kind of, at that point, because he was kind of going crazy a little bit.
Right.
And she was like, I don't know if I should believe him. Like, I don't know what's happening, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, George dies in a car crash. So, and it was ruled a suicide. And obviously it wasn't a suicide. To me, it's obvious. I'm not saying that's how it really is, but to me, it's like, okay, obviously these are both inside jobs. A screw wasn't loose on both of these.
Right. She made a good point tonight where she says, George plans every single second of his life. Obviously, you can't plan every second, but, he was the type of guy who did what he could, and, it's not him to just... Because she was speaking like they were saying it was a suicide. Yeah. Because she said...
it was ruled... His car accident was ruled a suicide. That he just, ran it into a pole or something.
Right. And so she's like, he wouldn't just randomly decide to commit suicide by running into a phone pole.
Especially the night that he shares this information about Secretary Marsh.
And then we learn even farther that the day that he died, he sent... the little $5 bill with, what did it say?
It's Tamerlane.
Tamerlane, which we don't know what that is, obviously. But, I mean, you don't send a random $5 bill because you owed a person from ballet, or you owed a person from some ballet that they paid for with this mysterious word.
Exactly.
The day that you died.
Well, yeah, there's something there. There's something there. And she's asking, so she's not going to the FBI or whatever, because since she thinks it could be an inside job, she doesn't know who's involved, who could be a part of it. So she goes to her CIA friends who also knew George and also, think that this could be, that she's not pulling this out of nowhere.
Right.
But
it seemed like they did at first, but then once she, made a few valid points about, how George was so meticulous and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Then they kind of came aboard, or at least one of her friends did.
Yeah, well, it was interesting that Juliet, the person who pulls out in the end, was the most convinced at the lunch.
Right.
But the one who didn't want to be involved is the one who comes to her at the end and says, "Okay, I believe you. I got this $5 bill. I know something's going on here."
Because how can you not say something? Like, clearly she knows if that was sent to her, it was sent to her for a reason.
Right.
She knows that something's got to be up with it. So if she didn't say anything, then it almost makes her, obviously she's not an accessory to the crime, but kind of an accessory to the crime. If
exactly.
She's admitting something that could be potentially very important.
Exactly. And there's a huge risk here. And at the lunch, she says, we can either be seen as these conspiracy theorists, blah, 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 or we're putting our lives in huge danger if this is actually true.
Right.
And she says later, she's like, George is dead, and do we want to be next? So it's obviously a huge risk. If it's an inside job, there's really no protection for them.
Right.
If they're going to try to fight this.
Seems like Henry and Elizabeth are both could be in a lot of danger soon.
Yeah.
We shall see.
All right, so that was pretty much that episode. So let's get into a little predictions.
Yeah.
And now, your AFTERBUZZ TV predictions.
That was creepy. All right, let's start with predictions for... Do you have anything specifically? I was thinking maybe we could talk about predictions topic-wise. So, like the Henry and SA situations, Daisy Matt.
The only thing that I really have predictions on are the Henry situation right now. I think that he will continue working.
Yeah.
And because I think that, maybe the bug won't work. Or I feel like it will, but it's not. They're not going to get what they need from that. And so the president is still going to need his help.
Yeah.
And I do think that him continually working with the NSA is probably going to be a little source of contention between him and Elizabeth. I don't think it's going to be anything major because I think they'll definitely be able to work it out.
Right.
That's kind of part of that life, but I could see it.
Yeah. They are such a perfect couple. It's interesting that this is the one thing that's kind of like their
jobs.
The touchy spot. Yeah. Going off that, I do think he'll keep working with the NSA and not tell Elizabeth about it, and she'll find out through someone else that he is. But I think that Klaus is going to figure out the whole chess piece situation, and that's going to put Henry in a very dangerous position, and maybe he has to go into isolation or something.
Yeah, I concur with that prediction.
And then as far as Daisy and Mako...
My prediction is that I hope that it'll
get cut from the show. No, I'm just kidding. I predict that she'll eventually break up with her fiance and there'll be a thing.
I think so too.
I mean, they wouldn't keep this relevant if something wasn't going to happen, because right now it's over. But they're holding on to it very tightly. I like the characters
on the show whenever they're actually talking about the real stuff.
Right.
But I don't like their characters together.
Doesn't she always look like she's about to cry?
She does. It's because her eyes are so big. But I've been told the same thing before because I have crazy eyes, I guess. But I don't know. I guess it's probably an eye problem. But I just don't like the two of them together because, I don't know, maybe they just need to be locked in a room and get some chemistry. But they don't have it as of now. But I kind of agree with you. I think it's going to end up with, or maybe she gets married and then she cheats on him with Matt, or I don't know. I see a lot of scandal coming from that, but hopefully it'll liven up a bit.
I want to know more about Blake. I'm hoping that in the coming episodes that he'll have more development, because he's basically just he's kind of like, they go to him for a light moment. He always has a funny line, a little joke. But I want to know more about his character.
Me too.
And also I want to know about Nadine and whether she is on Team Elizabeth or not, because Blake was doing the investigation on her, but he said he didn't find anything. But I'm wondering if he's still secretly doing that, and then we're going to have a bomb dropped about that.
Good point.
Later. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that about does it for us.
Okay,
April, where can the people find you?
Y'all can find me on Twitter and Instagram at April Whisenhant.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Sterling Cates, and be sure to follow AFTERBUZZ TV on both of those as well.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Bye.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.